We're out of the Apex for the second straight week, which is always great news. Derrick Lewis taking on Rodrigo Nascimento in the main event in St. Louis here. In this video, I'm going to be going through my full card predictions for every single fight. Not a crazy, fight card in terms of names, but I think there are some really fun scraps here, and I'm glad, we're getting cards outside of the Apex that don't have to be top tier, right? These, lesser fight nights, we can still have them outside the Apex. They can still have a nice environment. So good to see them leaving the Apex, at least here for this week. And let's just dive right into it. There's going to be timestamps down below if you guys want to jump around to specific fights. We're going to start off with Aldrich taking on Veronica Hardy. And Veronica Hardy has looked really good coming off her 3-year layoff. She was 2-0 in 2023. Aldrich here has a pretty solid UFC record, 9-5, but she just hasn't quite been able to get over the hump against ranked level competition. So she's racking up wins, but it's typically against some of the lower caliber women in the flyweight division. Veronica Hardy has looked kind of undersized at 125 pounds, but she's actually only going to be a little bit smaller than Aldrich here. I think there's a 1-inch height disadvantage and then a 3.5-inch reach disadvantage, which, may seem significant, but compared to some of her other opponents, it's not too bad. I think this is probably going to be a competitive fight. I wouldn't be shocked if this was a very close decision, maybe even a split decision, but I'm going to lead slightly towards Veronica Hardy here. She's just looked very impressive in her last 2 fights, and I also think she just has a little bit more finishing upside than Aldrich, so I think she can win a decision. Also think she could potentially find a finish, whether that's knockout or submission. I don't know if Aldrich, kind of has that versatility here. In the next matchup, we have Gooden taking on Kevin Jousset. We have Kevin Jousset here, who's only a year younger than Gooden, but in terms of his career, he's way younger. He's 2-0 in the UFC, had a submission win over Kiefer Crosby, and then a pretty, clear, impressive decision win over Song Kanan, who had a decently competitive fight with Ian Gary, got finished late in that one, but I think that was his first fight after that, taking on Kevin Jousset. Gooden is 2-4 in the UFC, but he's coming off a really nice comeback win over Wellington Turman, where he got rocked early in the second round, then ends up hurting Wellington Turman and then finishing him there in the second. I think Kevin Jousset's just going to be a little bit too clean on the feet here. I think he's the more technical striker. I do think this one will stay standing, and I think Kevin Jousset gets it done by decision. Gooden has been very durable in his career, so I think he'll make it all 3 rounds, but I think Kevin Jousset will take the decision there. Next up, we have a flyweight fight between Charles Johnson and Jake Hadley. I really like this matchup. I think this is very fun. These are both 2 strikers who want to stay on the feet. Both these guys, their UFC losses have come from getting taken down and controlled. That's where they're losing fights. They're not really getting outstruck on the feet, so I think it's fun that we're getting these 2 together. Charles Johnson is coming off a very impressive win over Azat Maxim. A lot of people thought he was going to be a top prospect in this flyweight division. He was 15-0 coming into this fight. Charles Johnson wins a unanimous decision against him. I believe he got dropped in the first round of that fight, comes back, wins the second and third round. So that was a great look for Charles Johnson here. Jake Hadley's coming off a 9-month layoff. He had a loss to Cody Durden in a pretty fun, competitive fight. My prediction here, I think this is going to be a close fight, but I'm actually going to go with the underdog here, Charles Johnson. I think he's going to be the bigger fighter, the rangier guy. I think he's just going to put more volume out there, and I don't know if Jake Hadley is going to be able to consistently hurt him to kind of overcome that volume disadvantage. Charles Johnson can push a crazy pace, especially if he's not having to deal with the grappling and the wrestling of his opponent. I think Charles Johnson's going to get it done. Would not be surprised if it was a split decision, but I think Charles Johnson gets the decision. Next up is going to be Billy Goff taking on Trey Waters, and if you haven't seen a Billy Goff fight, he's a dog. Really fun fighter to watch. He's going to put on a pace. He'll take some damage, but he'll go out and deliver it also. He got dropped in the first 30 seconds of his Contender Series fight, recovered, ended up finishing his opponent in the first round. Then in his UFC debut, he was getting touched up, was looking rough in the first round, finds a body shot finish in that same first round. So he's very durable and has some finishing capability, but he is kind of hittable. For Trey Waters, he's going to have a massive size advantage here. He is huge for the welterweight division. This dude is 6'5" with a 77-inch reach. He's going to be 7 inches taller than Billy Goff with a 4.5-inch reach advantage. He's sharp on the feet. Also has a nice submission game. He can kind of mix it up there. His only pro loss is to Gabriel Bonfim, which he's a top prospect in the welterweight division. No shame in that being your only loss here. I just don't think Goff is going to be able to find the finish in this matchup. I think he's going to get pieced up from the outside by Trey Waters. I think the distance is going to be too much. I think Trey Waters is going to manage it pretty well. I think he's just going to pick him apart, and I think he's going to win a pretty clear decision. I don't think it'd be crazy for Trey Waters to find a finish, but Billy Goff has been pretty durable. He's very, very tough. So I'm going to go with Trey Waters by decision here. Shifting over to Tabatha Ricci taking on Tecia Pennington, formerly Tecia Torres. I think the big question mark here in this matchup is that Tecia Pennington's coming off of having a baby. So, what form is she actually going to be in here? I think if this was Tecia Torres or Tecia Pennington, just coming off her loss to Mackenzie Dern, or very, very close loss to Mackenzie Dern, I think I'd probably favor her in this matchup, and it'd be a little bit more clear because she did look pretty solid in that Mackenzie Dern matchup. Stylistically, I think Tabatha Ricci is going to want to initiate the grappling. That's what she's gone to throughout her UFC career, and I think Pennington should want to keep it standing. It's not that Tecia Pennington shies away from the wrestling, the grappling, but she just doesn't have a ton of success when she tries to force it. She's a pretty low 14% takedown accuracy. In Tabatha Ricci's 4 UFC wins, she's landed 3, 4, 5, and 5 takedowns. So in the fights she's winning, she's pushing her game plan, she's landing those takedowns, she's racking up the control time. In her 2 losses, she was not able to land a single one. I think one of those was up at 125 against Manon Fiorot, which the size difference was just crazy in that fight. And then her most recent loss to Lupi Godinez. So when she's not able to land those takedowns, she kind of struggles. I'm going to go with Tabatha Ricci by a close decision here. I think the fact that, Tecia Pennington's coming off a layoff, coming off having a baby, we've seen her get taken down in her UFC career. Even though both these women are pretty small for the strawweight division, I think Ricci's going to be able to rack up enough control time to win some close rounds. And we just got to kind of assume here that Pennington's not 100% of what she was last time we saw her. So I'm going to lean towards Ricci, but I do think this will be a very close competitive fight. Now in the next one, probably one of the more fun fights on this card, Terrance McKinney taking on Esteban Ribovics. This is a great fight. Love the matchmaking here. It seems very, very unlikely that this fight goes the distance. I don't want to jinx it, but it seems like we have to see a finish here. Ribovics has actually gone to decision in both of his UFC fights, but he finished all 11 of his pre-UFC fights, and even his UFC fights, they've been wars. There have been opportunities for finishes there. Terrance McKinney has never gone to decision in his career. He is the definition of kill or be killed. He's going to go out early. He's going to push a pace. He's going to throw a ton at you, but he has faded in previous opportunities. So if he doesn't get that finish earlier on, he kind of tends to fade, and then the opportunity for him to get finished is there, but he's definitely very, very dangerous, especially in the first round. If this fight goes long, I feel like you have to favor Esteban here. He showcased that he can win fights by decision, even though, he hasn't done it super consistently throughout his UFC career, but he also does really go out there and put himself in danger. He's ultra aggressive, he's looking for the finish, and I think he'll give Terrance McKinney some openings to finish him early on. I just think the difference in this matchup is the durability and the cardio. I think both these guys have the potential to win early on. Even though we've never seen Esteban get finished, Terrance McKinney can put pretty much anyone out in this division, and I think Esteban can definitely put out Terrance McKinney. So I think both of them can have an early win, a round 1 finish. I just think Ribovics has way more upside the longer this fight goes. So if both of them can, get a win in the first round, if it gets into round 2, round 3, if we're going to decision, I just think Ribovics has a way better opportunity to win than Terrance McKinney. So I'm going to go with Esteban Ribovics round 2 knockout. I think he weathers an early storm. I think we see Terrance McKinney start to fade, and then I think we see him get the finish there by knockout. Another really fun fight right after, Chase Hooper taking on Slava Claus. Clear striker versus grappler matchup here, with Chase Hooper being the grappler, Slava Claus being the striker. Chase Hooper is very hittable on the feet, which is definitely concerning in this matchup, but then Slava Claus has also been very susceptible to getting taken down in his UFC career. In Slava Claus's 2 UFC losses and then his 1 draw, he's been taken down a combined 24 times. So averaging out getting taken down, 8 times a fight in the ones he doesn't win, that's not great. Now, Chase Hooper isn't known for having like great offensive wrestling, but he is a serious submission threat. And once they kind of, get tangled, he's just super crafty, and he also has some really nice ground and pound. I think this is going to be a matchup. It kind of reminds me of the Aljamain Sterling Calvin Kattar fight, just in the sense of like it seems very close. You don't really know which guy's going to pull away, but I think whatever guy does win, it's going to look very clear and obvious like afterwards, right? Like Aljo just completely controlled that fight. It seemed like the odds shouldn't have even been close, but you also wouldn't have been shocked if Calvin Kattar put out a pretty flawless performance. I feel like we're in a similar spot here where the odds are going to be close. I'm going to lean Chase Hooper here. I think he's really going to work to initiate the grappling, try to get some scrambles going, and whether he finds a finish or just racks up some control time, I think he does get this one done. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Slaviklaus just went out there, was able to stuff a few takedowns, landed some nasty body shots, and ended up putting Chase Hooper away. I think this really could go either way, but I'm going to lean towards Chase Hooper here. And I think it does go to decision, just because Slaviklaus, even though he's been taken down, he's shown an ability to not get finished early on in his UFC career. So slightly leaning towards Chase Hooper, but I think this one will be a fun, stylistic matchup. Now, moving up to the heavyweight division, we have Waldo Cortes-Acosta taking on Robelis Despaigne, the return of the 6'7 freak with a 87-inch reach advantage. We saw him debut at UFC 299, a very quick win. Who knows if Despaigne has cardio like after the first round. We've never seen him in a second round. He's only had 5 pro fights. His last 4 fights have ended in a combined 37 seconds. I just don't know if Waldo Cortes-Acosta is the guy who's going to stop him here, the guy who beats him. Cortes-Acosta has 1 finish in 5 UFC fights, so he's not a super high-level finisher. And even the guys he's been matched up against, like, his wins are kind of against lower-level heavyweights. He has wins over Jared Vanderaa, Chase Sherman, Lucas Borshchev, which was his one knockout win, and then away out of his prime, Andrei Arlovski. Obviously, prime Arlovski champion, but at this point in his career, nothing crazy here. So I'm going to ride with Robelis Despaigne. He just hasn't shown me anything to not pick him in this matchup. And if we're picking Robelis Despaigne, we got to go with a round 1 knockout. So that's going to be the pick. Moving over to Alex Caceres taking on Sean Woodson. I really like this matchup here. Sean Woodson is just an absolute pain to fight against. He's a 6'2" featherweight with a 78-inch reach advantage. The fact that this dude can make 145 with that frame is just absurd. He's coming off a pretty close win over Charles Jourdain. He also has wins over Terrance McKinney and Youssef Zalal. The Youssef Zalal win definitely kind of aging well after his performance against Billy Q. For Alex Caceres, this is going to be his 30th UFC fight, which seems crazy. I think he's like mid-30s right now, even though he still kind of looks like he's pretty young. He's coming off a loss to Giga Chikadze. I think Alex Caceres is a fighter who's, could potentially be at like the back end of the top 15 or like the 15 to 20 area. I think he does belong there. I just don't really like this matchup for him. I don't think he has the power in his hands to consistently hurt Sean Woodson. We've seen Sean Woodson get hurt. You can put him down, but you kind of need that power to do it. And then I don't think Caceres has the wrestling to, be able to consistently take down and control Sean Woodson. Woodson's takedown defense has gotten a lot better. He has an 84% takedown defense. He's only been taken down 1 time in his last 4 fights. So stylistically, I just don't think this is a great fight for Alex Caceres. I'm going to go with Sean Woodson by decision. Moving up a weight class to lightweight, we have Diego Ferreira taking on Mateusz Rebecki. And Diego Ferreira has been pretty inactive recently. He lost 3 in a row. He took a 1.5 years off and then came back with a nasty knockout win over Michael Johnson, put him out bad. But this fight will be nearly a year later, so still pretty inactive. Diego Ferreira in his career, though, has really only lost to the best of the best. He has 5 losses in his career in the UFC. He's lost to Beneil Dariush twice, lost to Dustin Poirier, lost to Gregor Gillespie, who I don't think has fought since then, but is an animal if you guys aren't familiar, and then Mateusz Gamrot. So he's losing to the best of the best, but I do think Rebecki has the potential to be someone who's a player in the top 15. He's 3-0 in the UFC, coming off of back-to-back finishes, absolutely butchered Loic Rabajov in his second UFC fight. And we're looking at Diego Ferreira here at 39 years old. Definitely seems like he's out of his prime. He's been inactive. Even though he had the KO win against Michael Johnson, he was losing that fight before it. So I'm going to go with Mateusz Rebecki by knockout. I think he gets it done in round 1. I think, he's the younger guy. He's moving up in this division. I think this is his opportunity to get a fight in the top 15 after he beats Diego Ferreira. After that one, we're going to have Alonzo Menifield taking on Carlos Ulberg. Both these guys have been rolling in the light heavyweight division. Menifield is unbeaten in his last 5, coming off of 2 solid wins over Jimmy Crute and Dustin Jacoby. For Carlos Ulberg, he had a really tough UFC debut against Kennedy and Chukwu, but since then, 5 straight wins, 4 straight finishes. I don't think there are many 205ers out there who can stand with Carlos Ulberg or should be standing out there with Carlos Ulberg. And I just don't know if Menifield has the consistent wrestling to be able to take and hold Carlos Ulberg down. He controls range well. He hasn't been held down in his UFC career. Now, Alonzo Menifield definitely has the power to catch Ulberg. We've seen him get knocked out by Kennedy. But I think this is going to stay on the feet, and it's really tough for me to pick against Carlos Ulberg in a standing fight. So I'm going to go with Carlos Ulberg by round 2 knockout. Think we see him piece Menifield up in the first round and then find that finish in round 2. Now, looking at the co-main event, Joaquin Buckley taking on Nursultan Ruziboyev. The size difference in this fight is going to be crazy. I talked about Trey Waters and Billy Goff. This one's going to be pretty similar. Ruziboyev is 6'5", and then Joaquin Buckley is 7 inches shorter at 5'10". I think both of these guys have the ability to end this fight quickly, but I just think Buckley's going to have more gas the longer this fight goes. You wouldn't really think it, the super kind of like jacked up muscly guy having the better cardio, but I do think that's kind of the case here. 6 of Ruziboyev's 8 losses are by decision. He only has 2 decision wins. So what that's telling me is Ruziboyev's a finisher, but he's going to go out there, he's going to expend a lot of energy, and if he doesn't find that finish early on, he can kind of wilt, fade, end up losing his fights by decision. It's kind of tough to know what Ruziboyev's ceiling is in the UFC because his pre-UFC record, even though he has a ton of fights and a solid record, it's a little bit questionable. You had some interesting matchmaking there, and then we've only seen 2 fights in the UFC, and the most recent one was like an eye poke TKO, and then the first one was just a really, really quick finish, so we just haven't seen a ton out of him. Buckley's had some much higher caliber wins, coming off a win over Vicente Luque where he pretty much just broke him. So I'm going to lean towards Joaquin Buckley. I would not be shocked if Ruziboyev won this, but I'm going to go with a Joaquin Buckley round 3 knockout. I think we see Ruziboyev fade. I think Joaquin Buckley's going to jump on it. I think he's going to knock out Ruziboyev in the 3rd round. I believe St. Louis is his hometown, so hopefully he gets the win there in front of his people. And then the main event, Derrick Lewis taking on Rodrigo Nascimento. Interesting matchmaking here. It seemed like the Derrick Lewis-Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight was just right there, but they end up going with Derrick Lewis and Rodrigo Nascimento. I think this is a very winnable fight for Derrick Lewis. You look at Rodrigo Nascimento, he doesn't have any of the things that typically would give Derrick Lewis challenges. He's not an elite wrestler. He does have good jiu-jitsu. 6 of his 11 wins in the UFC are by sub, or 6 of his 11 wins in general are by sub. But he's not a great wrestler, so he's not great at actually getting the fight to the ground. And then he's not a super powerful heavyweight. He has 0 knockdowns in 7 UFC fights. Derrick Lewis is coming off the loss to Jailton Almeida, which he pretty much just got dominated for 25 minutes. But he showed pretty solid submission defense. It was honestly kind of shocking watching that. It seemed like once Almeida got him down in mount that he was just going to be done. He wasn't. He survived, went 25 minutes, which is kind of crazy. But when we're looking at his recent losses, he's really losing to pretty much the best of the best. Sirogan, Tai Tuivasa, Sergey Pavlovich, Sergey Spivak, and then Jailton Almeida. And maybe you're going to say Tai Tuivasa is not the best of the best, but I still think he's a different level from Rodrigo Nascimento. And if you're not going to bring that finishing capability here against Derrick Lewis, it's tough for me to pick against him. I don't think Rodrigo Nascimento belongs in the group of guys I just mentioned. So I'm going with Derrick Lewis, round 1 knockout. We saw in the Marcus Rogerio de Lima fight, the last time they tried to really push Derrick Lewis towards the back of the top 15 or even outside the top 15, he went out there, knocked him out with a flying knee and some follow-up shots. So I think we're going to get a Derrick Lewis finish. Would love to see a round 1 knockout from Derrick Lewis. So that's going to be the pick, round 1 KO. Let me know how you guys are feeling about this card. You picking some different guys. Let me know down below. Let me know your reasoning. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.